the past few weeks, we've talked about sampling the emerged corn crop. And this week, UNL Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler says soybean producers can now be looking for signs of seedling diseases.
Well, right now we've got a huge range of development and growth stages for soybeans across the state, but now's the time that we see those stand problems that we can get identified to know what to do in the future and to manage them.
So what specifically should producers be looking for?
Right now, if we're seeing plants that are damping off or dying at the early stages, or they're seeing seeds not develop or emerge, those would be those pre or post-emergence damping off symptoms that we'd see in soybean. All of our pathogens that cause the disease can be active at any time through probably the V2 growth stage primarily, or the two-leaf stage in soybean for the early season diseases.
We saw some heavy rains across parts of Nebraska this week and also some hail. Are there those triggers that could affect it as well?
Absolutely. Heavy rains will favor our Pythium and our Phytophthora diseases, which are water molds, and like those really wet conditions, those hail events, and anytime we get high-speed winds and sandblasting, those will add stress to the plants, and those young seedlings will die as a result of that injury as well from those fungal infections.
You mentioned a few of the diseases. I'll just let you go ahead and pronounce the other ones as well.
So we got Pythium and Phytophthora are the main ones in wet conditions, and then we've got Rhizoctonia and Fusarium. And of those, the Rhizoctonia is probably the one that's most common. We see that a lot in our sandier fields, well-drained fields. That's a lot of times where we'll see Rhizoctonia.
Is there a big difference in how those four affect the plant individually?
Well, all four of those will affect it virtually the same way, in that we'll see that early season damping off or dying of the seedling. The big difference is at Phytophthora, we can see that even later in the season. That's a fungus that will affect the plant throughout the season and cause those really nice, really dark stem lesions that we'll see on that lower portion of the plant. And that's one then also that we can, if we get it identified correctly, we can use resistance for management.
Yeah, why is it important to identify it correctly based on those four and what they can do to the plant in each different stage?
Well, while all of them are common in Nebraska, knowing exactly which one you have as the main problem in your field is really important for the selection of seed treatments in the future when you're looking at the crop in the next time it's going to be in soybean, as well as looking at the use of resistant varieties, and again specifically for Phytophthora, that's where that one comes in.
Is there a time frame when you're out of the woods with this?
Well, I'd say once your crop really gets to that V2, V3 growth stage, you're going to be at a point where you're not going to see seedling problems, and really once you even get a plant a little bit before that, just that you've got some good active leaf tissue, that really increases that plant's defense, and you're going to see it take off and be pretty healthy.
Let's talk about sampling. What's the process for actually going through and sampling in fields?
Well, like I mentioned, you really need to make sure you know what you have that you're trying to manage. So the best thing is to get some of those seedlings. If you're having stand problems, you can dig those up, make sure you get the whole root system, put a half a dozen of them into a plastic bag to keep them moist, and then those can be taken to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic at UNL in Lincoln, or your local University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension office for identification. Also, good idea to have some healthy plants in there as well, just so you know to compare them to see what you're looking like.
But the sample size is again about 6 plants?
About 6 plants is sufficient to do that, yeah.
Let's talk about some of those treatment options more specifically and the differences in them.
Well, when we look at seed treatments, a lot of companies have their own combinations that they use, but there will be some differences that you can add to those treatments. And specifically when we're looking at Phytophthora, like I mentioned, using resistant varieties, but then also increasing the metalaxyl or mefenoxam component of that treatment is going to be really important for Phytophthora. And a lot of times when we see producers that have fields that they're having significant stand problems and they've used just a general seed treatment, many times that's Phytophthora because that rate of the metalaxyl or mefenoxam is not high enough to control the disease. The other one that's important to match up is with our fields with Rhizoctonia and making sure you have a strobilurin-based fungicide in there. So those differences are really important, and that's why we look at identification of the problem.
Is this something that carries from field to field? I mean, if you plant in soybeans the next year or the year after that, I guess more appropriately, will it carry over?
Absolutely. These are all fungi that survive very well in soil and will be there indefinitely. So regardless of your rotation, if you've had a problem with one of these diseases, it will be there the next time you have soybean in the field.
Pictures and other information on soybean seedling diseases are available on the CropWatch website at cropwatch.unl.edu.